This segment of the Chapter 12 lecture is titled The Crusade Against Slavery, and the focus question is, what were the different varieties of abolitionism? Compared to drinking, breaking the Sabbath, and illiteracy, the greatest evil in American society first attracted the least attention from reformers. For decades, the only criticism of slavery seemed to come from Quakers, slaves, and free blacks. Before the 1830s, most white Americans who called for the abolition of slavery also supported the colonization of free slaves, or their deportation to Africa, the Caribbean, or Central America. In 1816, supporters of this idea founded the American Colonization Society, which promoted the gradual abolition of slavery and the settlement of black Americans in Africa. It soon established Liberia on the coast of West Africa, to which some free blacks did emigrate. Even though many saw colonization as impractical, prominent political leaders in the Jacksonian era, such as Henry Clay, John Marshall, Daniel Webster, and even Jackson himself, supported the Colonization Society. Many in the North saw colonization as the only means of ending slavery, while Southern colonizationists urged free blacks, whom they regarded a degraded group that endangered white society, to leave the country. Others simply thought racism so entrenched that it was safer for blacks, once freed, to leave the nation. Like Indian removal, colonization rested on the premise that America was a fundamentally white society. Of course, while several thousand free blacks did migrate to Liberia, most African Americans opposed the idea of colonization and argued that, as Americans, they had the right to remain in the United States as free and equal citizens. In 1817, some 3,000 free blacks assembled in Philadelphia for the first Black National Convention, in which they resolved to claim their rights while remaining in their homes. Some black organizations even removed the word African from their names to eliminate any possible reason for deportation. The abolitionist movement of the 1830s arose in opposition to colonization and its supporters. The new abolitionists drew on the religious idea that slavery was a sin, and the secular one that it contradicted the values enshrined in the Declaration of Independence. They rejected gradual emancipation and demanded the immediate abolition of slavery. They vociferously criticized slavery and slaveholders and affirmed that blacks, once freed, should become equal citizens of the Republic, not colonizers of distant lands. White abolitionists demanded that race should not prevent the equal enjoyment of economic, civil, and political rights in the United States. They opposed racism in all its forms. The first sign of this new abolitionism was an appeal to the colored citizens of the world, an 1829 pamphlet written by David Walker, a free black in Boston. Walker called on black Americans to mobilize for abolition, with arms if necessary, and warned Americans that God would punish them if they did not end slavery. Walker invoked the Bible and the Declaration of Independence, but he also asked blacks to take pride in African civilization's achievements and claim their rights as Americans. Walker died under mysterious circumstances. Only with the appearance in 1831 of The Liberator, the weekly journal of William Lloyd Garrison, did the new abolitionism take root. Garrison, a Bostonian, was strident in his rhetoric and unbending in his commitment to abolition. Garrison even suggested that the North should abrogate the Constitution and dissolve the Union in order to end its complicity with slavery. While few abolitionists supported this notion, many adopted his criticisms of colonization and called for immediate abolition. While other anti-slavery publications emerged en masse, The Liberator continued as the preeminent abolitionist journal. The abolitionist movement quickly spread from a handful of activists to thousands of villages, towns, and cities throughout the North. They took advantage of new print technology and expanding literacy by printing and distributing enormous amounts of pamphlets, newspapers, books, novels, and broadsides. Between the formation of the American Anti-Slavery Society in 1833 and 1840, about 100,000 Northerners joined local abolition groups. Most were ordinary citizens, although a few prominent men, such as the New York merchants Arthur and Lewis Tappan, also joined. Theodore Weld, an evangelical minister, helped create a mass constituency for abolition by using the methods of the revivalists, calling slavery a sin that could only be absolved by immediate abolition. Furthermore, abolitionists pioneered modern fundraising methods such as charity fairs, where products provided by anti-slavery advocates were sold and the proceeds donated to the cause. The efforts were a foretaste of later consumer activism. While many Southerners believed that the abolitionists hoped to incite a slave insurrection, nearly all abolitionists, despite their militant rhetoric, rejected violence as a means of ending slavery. Many were pacifists, or non-resistants, who believed that coercion had to be eliminated from all human institutions and relationships. They adopted the strategy of moral suasion, or convincing slaveholders to end their sinful ways and shaming Northerners into action. Abolitionists were the first in American history to try to transform society by changing mass opinion through education and agitation instead of infiltrating existing political parties. Abolitionism both reinforced and challenged Jacksonian America's common understandings of freedom. It helped to popularize the market revolution concept that freedom was rooted not in property ownership, but self-ownership and the right to enjoy the fruits of one's own labor. Abolitionists repudiated the idea of wage slavery popularized by the labor movement and Southern defenders of slavery alike. Instead, they insisted the wage laborer was the embodiment of freedom, with the opportunity to change jobs at will, accumulate property, and enjoy a stable family life, freedoms denied to slaves. On the other hand, abolitionists felt that slavery was so deeply embedded in the United States that fundamental changes nationwide would have to occur. Personal liberty took precedence over other forms of freedom such as property rights and local self-government. The abolitionists tried to reassert that freedom was a universal entitlement in an age when freedom and citizenship had become associated with whiteness. The idea that Americans could be a single people, undifferentiated by race, has its origins with the abolitionists, not the founding fathers. Anti-slavery activists viewed slaves and free blacks as equal members of the national community, a concept summarized by Lydia Maria Child in her 1833 work, An Appeal in Favor of That Class of Americans Called Africans. They argued that birthplace, not race, should determine who was an American, an idea later enshrined in the 14th Amendment. They were the first to argue that human rights were more important than national sovereignty, and they urged enforcement of international laws against the slave trade and slavery. While some abolitionists like Garrison detested the Constitution as a covenant with the devil, others like Frederick Douglass believed that it offered no protections to slavery. But abolitionists invented the concept of equality before the law regardless of race, and they consciously presented abolition as the culmination of the Revolution's values of liberty and equality. Abolitionists seized upon the language of the Declaration of Independence and created from the old State House bell the symbol of the Liberty Bell. Of course, all Americans claim their political beliefs were representations of the revolutionary legacy, including Southern slave owners. Abolitionists never represented more than a small portion of the Northern population, but as the controversy intensified, their belief that slavery contradicted the national heritage of freedom spread far beyond their own circles.